I collapsed on the cold marble steps of my parents' mansion, 7 months pregnant, clutching a wad of crumpled $100 bills my father had just thrown at my feet like I was some kind of beggar. My mother's words still rang in my ears like shattered glass. Don't waste good insurance on a failed investment like you. That was the moment I realized I had been fighting for the love of people who saw me as nothing more than a liability, a disappointment, a burden they wished they could erase from their perfect family portrait. But let me tell you something. That moment, as devastating as it was, became the foundation of everything I am today. If you want to hear how a woman who was left to die on her own parents' doorstep built an empire that made those same people beg for scraps, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Because trust me, this story is going to take you on a ride you won't forget. Let me take you back to where it all started, because you need to understand just how deep this betrayal went. I grew up as Ava Hartwell, daughter of Richard and Eleanor Hartwell, one of the wealthiest families in Connecticut. My father owned a massive real estate development corporation, and my mother spent her days organizing charity galas and making sure our family's reputation remained spotless in the social circles that mattered. My older brother Ethan was the golden child, groomed from birth to take over the family empire. He went to Yale, joined the right clubs, networked with the right people, and never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was just the spare, the afterthought, the daughter who existed solely to make a good marriage and strengthen family connections. I tried so hard to earn their approval. I really did. I graduated summa cum laude from Parsons School of Design, thinking that maybe if I proved myself talented and successful in my own right, they would finally see me as more than just a chess piece in their social games. But every achievement I earned was met with polite indifference or backhanded compliments. When I won a prestigious design competition in my senior year, my mother's only comment was that it was nice I had hobbies to keep me busy until I found a suitable husband. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. The real trouble started when I met Liam O'Connor. He came to fix my car at a local garage when I was 24, and I was immediately drawn to him in a way I had never experienced with any of the country club sons my parents kept pushing toward me. Liam was genuine, hardworking, and kind. He had rough hands from years of manual labor, but those hands were gentle when they held mine. He had a laugh that could light up a room in dreams of one day owning his own garage. He saw me for who I was, not for the Hartwell name or the trust fund I was supposedly going to inherit. I knew my parents would never approve, but I was naive enough to think that if I was happy, they might eventually come around. I was so wrong. When I brought Liam to Sunday dinner at the estate, the temperature in that dining room dropped about 40 degrees. My father barely acknowledged him, asking pointed questions about his education and career prospects in a tone dripping with condescension. My mother kept glancing at his calloused hands like they might contaminate the silverware. Ethan smirked through the entire meal, making jokes about blue-collar workers that weren't really jokes at all. Liam handled it with more grace than they deserved, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. After dinner, my father pulled me aside into his study. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it changed everything. He told me in no uncertain terms that if I continued this relationship with a mechanic, I would be cut off financially and socially. I would no longer be considered part of the family. My trust fund would be revoked, my name removed from all family documents, and I would be dead to them. He said these words calmly, like he was discussing the weather or a business transaction. I was terrified. I had never worked a real job in my life. I had always lived in comfort, never worried about money or security. The idea of being completely on my own was paralyzing. But when I looked at Liam, when I thought about a life of pretending to be someone I wasn't, just to please people who would never really love me, I made my choice. I chose him. I chose love. I chose freedom. My family made good on their threats immediately. Within a week, my credit cards were canceled, my apartment lease terminated, and my phone flooded with messages from family, friends, and relatives telling me I had made a huge mistake and brought shame to the Hartwell name. My mother sent a single text message that read, "You are no longer our daughter." That was it. No follow-up, no second chances, no room for reconciliation. Liam and I got married at City Hall with 2 witnesses we didn't even know. We moved into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a not-so-great neighborhood, and Liam took on extra shifts at the garage while I started looking for design work. It was hard, harder than I ever imagined. I had to learn how to budget for groceries, how to do laundry without ruining clothes, how to survive on ramen noodles and hope. But we were happy. For the first time in my life, I was building something real with someone who actually loved me. Then I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but we were both thrilled. Scared out of our minds, but thrilled. Liam started working double shifts, taking every overtime opportunity he could get. I was picking up small freelance design projects, working from home, trying to save every penny for the baby. We were making it work. We were going to be okay. Until I wasn't. At 7 months pregnant, I started feeling wrong. Swelling in my hands and feet, terrible headaches, blurred vision. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just normal pregnancy stuff, but it got worse fast. One morning, I woke up and couldn't see clearly at all. Liam rushed me to the emergency room, and that's when the doctor delivered the terrifying diagnosis. Severe preeclampsia, dangerously high blood pressure that was threatening both my life and the baby's. I needed to be hospitalized immediately for monitoring, possibly induced early, and the medical bills were going to be astronomical. Liam was at work when I got the news, pulling a double shift to cover some of the upcoming medical costs we had been anticipating for a normal delivery. I was alone in that hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, listening to my baby's heartbeat through the speakers, and I was absolutely terrified. Our insurance was basic, the kind that covered emergencies but would leave us drowning in debt for something like this. We had some savings, but it wouldn't be nearly enough. And then, in my fear and desperation, I remembered something. My family had a premium health insurance plan, one of those executive packages that covered absolutely everything with minimal out-of-pocket costs. It covered family members in emergencies. Technically, I might still be on it. Even if I wasn't, even if they had removed me, maybe they would help. Maybe faced with the possibility of losing their daughter and grandchild, they would remember that we were family. I called my mother. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number I had deleted and restored a dozen times over the past 2 years. It rang 4 times before she picked up, and when she answered, her voice was cold and distant, like I was a telemarketer interrupting her afternoon. I explained everything as quickly as I could. I told her about the preeclampsia, the danger, the baby, the medical costs. I didn't outright ask for money. I just explained the situation, hoping that maternal instinct would kick in, that some part of her would care. There was a long silence after I finished talking. Then she spoke, and her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. That insurance is for actual family emergencies, Ava. Not for the consequences of your poor choices. You chose to marry a mechanic and live that life. Now you deal with it. We are not responsible for bailing you out of the mess you created. I tried to reason with her. I begged. I told her I was scared, that the doctors said it was life-threatening. She cut me off mid-sentence. You made your bed, Ava. Lie in it. Don't call this number again. She hung up. I sat there in that hospital bed, staring at my phone, feeling something inside me break in a way I didn't know was possible. But I was also desperate, and desperation makes you do things you never thought you would do. I convinced myself that maybe if I went there in person, if they could see me pregnant and sick, they would help. Surely they wouldn't turn away their own daughter at the door. I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice. The nurses tried to stop me, but I was determined. I took a taxi to the Hartwell estate, that massive colonial mansion in the wealthy suburb where I had grown up. It looked exactly the same. Perfectly manicured lawn, pristine white columns, the kind of house that appeared in magazines about luxury living. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding, my vision still spotty. Ethan answered the door. He looked at me with pure disgust, taking in my cheap maternity clothes, my swollen face, my obvious distress. He didn't say hello. He just stared at me like I was some kind of pest that had wandered onto the property. Then my parents appeared behind him. My father looked older, his hair grayer than I remembered, but his expression was the same cold calculation I had seen in his study that night 2 years ago. My mother was impeccably dressed as always, but her face held no warmth, no recognition of the scared, sick daughter standing on her doorstep. I tried to explain again. I was crying now, too exhausted and frightened to maintain any dignity. I told them about the baby, about how serious it was, about how I just needed help with the medical costs. I wasn't asking them to accept Liam or welcome me back into the family. I just needed them to help me survive this. My father reached into his wallet and pulled out a small stack of bills. Maybe $100 total. He threw them at my feet, the bills scattering across the cold marble entryway. I stared at them, not understanding what was happening. That's all you're worth to us now, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. Don't waste our good insurance policy on a failed investment. Don't dirty our home again with your presence. You are not our daughter. You are nothing to us. My mother said nothing. She just turned and walked away, disappearing into the depths of the house. Ethan smirked at me, that same superior smirk he had always worn when he knew he had won. You actually thought they would help you? He laughed. You're pathetic, Ava. You always were. Then he shut the door in my face. I stood there on those marble steps, 7 months pregnant with a life-threatening condition, holding a handful of crumpled bills, and I felt something inside me die. Not hope, exactly. Something deeper than that. It was the last thread of connection to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. That thread snapped, and I fell to my knees right there on the steps. I don't know how long I sat there. Time felt strange, liquid. I remember thinking that maybe I would just die right there, and they would find me in the morning, and maybe then they would feel something. But even in my darkest moment, I thought of Liam and the baby growing inside me. They needed me to survive. They needed me to fight. I called Liam. He answered on the first ring, immediately sensing something was wrong from my voice. I managed to tell him where I was before I started losing consciousness. The last thing I remember before everything went black was his voice on the phone, frantic, telling me to hold on, that he was coming. Later, Liam told me what happened next. He drove like a madman from the garage to my parents' house, breaking every speed limit. When he got there, he found me unconscious at the bottom of the steps, my face gray, barely breathing. He called 911, and the ambulance rushed us to the hospital. The doctors said another 30 minutes and I would have died. The baby too. They performed an emergency C-section that night. Maya came into the world at 7 months, tiny and fragile, weighing just 3 pounds. She spent weeks in the NICU, hooked up to tubes and monitors, fighting for every breath. The medical bills were catastrophic, more than we could ever hope to pay. But we were alive, both of us, against all odds. I woke up 2 days after the surgery, weak and disoriented. Liam was sitting beside my bed, holding my hand, his eyes red from crying. He told me about Maya, showed me pictures on his phone of our tiny daughter in the incubator. Then he told me about what he had found at my parents' house, about how close I had come to dying. The look in his eyes when he spoke about my family was something I had never seen before. Liam was the gentlest man I knew, but in that moment, I saw pure rage. They did this to you, he said, his voice shaking. They almost killed you. Almost killed our daughter. And for what? Pride? Money? I don't care if they have all the wealth in the world, Ava. They are dead to us now. From this moment on, they don't exist. It's just us. Just our family. And I swear to you, I swear on everything I am, I will build a life for us that makes them choke on their regret. I squeezed his hand, too weak to speak, but I felt something shift inside me. The sadness, the longing for my parents' love and approval, it started to transform into something else, something harder and more determined. They had abandoned me at my most vulnerable. They had valued their pride and their money more than my life. Fine, I would show them exactly what they had thrown away. The years that followed were the hardest of my life, but also the most fulfilling. Maya spent 2 months in the NICU before we could bring her home. The hospital bills were crushing, and we were paying them off in tiny increments that felt like trying to empty an ocean with a teaspoon. Liam was working 70, 80-hour weeks at the garage. He would come home exhausted, covered in grease, and still find the energy to help with Maya, to hold me when I cried from stress and exhaustion. But Liam didn't just work. He planned. He saved. He started buying old, broken-down cars for next to nothing and restoring them in our apartment building's parking garage at night. He had a gift for seeing potential in things other people had given up on, for taking something destroyed and making it beautiful again. He would sell these restored cars for a profit, and slowly, painfully slowly, we started to build something. I couldn't just sit still either. While taking care of Maya during the day, I started reaching out to small local businesses, offering design services for their websites, logos, and marketing materials. I worked during Maya's naps, late at night after she was asleep, any moment I could steal. My first client was a small bakery owned by a woman who took a chance on me despite my lack of a professional portfolio. That one project led to another, then another. Word spread. I was good at what I did, and I was hungry in a way that people who had always had comfort could never be. Our apartment was cramped and sometimes the heat didn't work properly in winter, but it was filled with love. I remember one day when Maya, who was about 2 years old, found some crayons and drew all over our white living room wall. In my parents' house, that would have resulted in screaming and punishment. Liam and I looked at each other, looked at Maya's proud little face, and just started laughing. We turned it into a game. filling the whole wall with drawings together. That wall became my favorite thing in that apartment. The breakthrough came about 3 years after Maya was born. Liam had impressed a customer named Mr. Miller, an older gentleman who owned a chain of car dealerships across the state. Mr. Miller had brought in a vintage Corvette that other mechanics had told him was beyond saving. Liam took it as a personal challenge. He worked on that car for months, hunting down original parts, fabricating what he couldn't find, pouring his heart into every detail. When he presented the finished car to Mr. Miller, the old man actually cried. He said it looked better than the day he had first bought it 40 years ago. Mr. Miller asked Liam what his plans were for the future. Liam, never one to dream small, told him about his vision for a garage that specialized in restoring classic and luxury cars, a place where craftsmanship mattered more than speed, where cars were treated like art. Mr. Miller looked at him for a long moment, then asked how much capital Liam needed to make it happen. That's how Liam's Precision Auto was born. Mr. Miller became our investor and partner, providing the initial funding and business connections. Liam provided the skill and vision. Within a year, we had moved from that tiny apartment to a small house, and the garage was starting to make a real name for itself among car enthusiasts and collectors. Liam hired a small team of mechanics who shared his passion, and the business grew steadily. My own career was flourishing too. I had saved enough from my freelance work to rent a small office space and officially launch Phoenix Design, named for the mythical bird that rises from ashes. I chose that name deliberately. It was a declaration, a reminder of where I had come from and what I had survived. My specialty became helping small businesses and startups build their brands from the ground up. I understood what it was like to start with nothing, to have to fight for every opportunity, and I used that understanding to connect with my clients in ways that more established agencies couldn't. I made it a point to hire single mothers, women who were struggling to balance work and family, women who had been overlooked by other companies because they didn't fit the traditional corporate mold. I gave them flexible schedules, fair pay, and the kind of support I had never received. Phoenix Design wasn't just a business. It was a statement about what was possible when you believed in people everyone else had written off. During those years of building our lives, I never reached out to my family. I blocked their numbers, avoided the social circles where I might run into them, and tried to pretend they had never existed. Liam never brought them up unless I did. He understood that some wounds need time to scar over before you can look at them without flinching. But I did keep tabs on them, in a distant, clinical way. Social media made it impossible not to see glimpses of their lives. My mother posted constantly about their European vacations, charity galas, and society events. Ethan flaunted his success in finance, posing with expensive cars and designer suits, always with some caption about hard work and dedication that made me want to throw my phone across the room. My father gave interviews about his business philosophy, talking about the importance of family values and integrity, with absolutely no sense of irony. They looked happy, successful, untouched by the cruelty they had inflicted on me, and for a while, that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I would lie awake some nights, next to Liam, wondering if they ever thought about me, if they ever felt even a moment of regret. I was about to get my answer in the most spectacular way possible. One morning, about 5 years after that terrible night on their doorstep, Liam was reading the business section of the newspaper over breakfast. He suddenly went very still, staring at an article with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then he passed the paper to me without a word. The headline read, "Hartwell Real Estate Empire Collapses Amid Fraud Investigation." I read the article 3 times, unable to fully process what I was seeing. Apparently, Ethan had been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme for years, using company funds and investor money to support his lavish lifestyle while providing fake returns to keep the scheme going. When the market downturn hit, the whole house of cards collapsed. The company was bankrupt. Investors were suing. The FBI was involved. My father's entire empire, built over decades, was destroyed in a matter of months, and Ethan was going to prison. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt that rush of schadenfreude that comes from watching your enemies fall. But mostly I just felt numb. These were the people who had valued money and status above everything, even their own daughter's life. And now they had lost it all anyway. I didn't reach out, I didn't gloat. I just went back to my life, to my work, to my family. But 2 weeks later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was my mother. Her voice was different than I remembered, shaky and desperate. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. She launched immediately into an explanation of their situation, talking rapidly like she was afraid I would hang up. My father was sick, she said. Heart failure. He needed a transplant. But they had lost everything in the bankruptcy, including their health insurance. They had no way to pay for the medical care he needed. Ethan was in prison awaiting trial. She was alone, and she was scared. Then came the ask, phrased not as a request but almost as a demand. You have to help us, Ava. You're successful now. I've seen your company online. You owe us this. We gave you life. We raised you. You can't just abandon your family in their time of need. The irony was so thick I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just listened in silence as she continued to talk, to plead, to make her case for why I should save them. When she finally ran out of words, there was a long pause. I hung up without saying a single word. But I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. My mother was nothing if not persistent, especially when she wanted something. And I was right. A few days later, they showed up at my studio. I was in a meeting with a client when my assistant buzzed my office to tell me that Richard and Eleanor Hartwell were in the lobby, demanding to see me. For a moment, I considered having her call security. But another part of me, a part I wasn't particularly proud of, wanted to see them. I wanted to see what desperation looked like on the faces of people who had once thrown money at my feet. I excused myself from my meeting and walked out to the lobby, and there they were. My father looked terrible. He had lost weight, his skin had a grayish tinge, and he moved slowly, like every step hurt. He was a shadow of the imposing man I remembered. My mother looked older too, her designer clothes hanging a bit too loosely, her makeup unable to fully hide the stress lines around her eyes. But it was the expression on her face that struck me most. It was fear mixed with something that might have been shame, though I couldn't be sure she was capable of that emotion. We should talk in private, my father said, his voice weak. We can talk right here, I replied, making no move to invite them into my office. My mother glanced around at my employees watching curiously from their desks. Please, Ava, not here. I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. Anything you have to say to me, you can say here. So they did. Right there in my lobby, in front of my staff and clients, they begged. My mother cried, real tears this time, explaining again about my father's condition, about how they had lost everything, about how I was their only hope. My father tried to maintain some dignity, but even he eventually admitted they needed my help. The words that came out of my mother's mouth next were almost too perfect, too ironic. You owe us this, she said, reaching out to grab my hand. I stepped back, out of her reach. We gave you life, Ava. We're your family. You can't just abandon us. I looked at her for a long moment, and I felt something click into place inside me. This was it. This was the moment I had been unconsciously waiting for. The moment where I got to look into the eyes of the people who had abandoned me when I was dying on their doorstep and choose how this story ended. I could have been cruel. God knows they deserved it. I could have thrown their words back at them, could have made them feel a fraction of the pain they had caused me. But as I stood there, looking at these broken, desperate people who had once seemed so powerful, I realized something important. My revenge had already happened. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was simply living well, building a life they told me I could never have, succeeding without them, and raising a daughter in a home filled with love instead of conditional approval. The best revenge wasn't making them suffer. It was being genuinely happy without them. But that didn't mean I was going to save them. You're right, I said quietly. You did give me life. 24 years ago, you brought me into this world. But 5 years ago, you left me to die on your doorstep. You threw money at my feet and told me I was a failed investment. You valued your pride more than my life, more than your granddaughter's life. So yes, I owed you for giving me life. But I paid that debt in full the night I almost died trying to get you to care. My mother tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I have a daughter now, I continued. And every single day, I look at her and wonder how anyone could treat their child the way you treated me. I wonder what kind of love is so conditional that it evaporates the moment your child makes a choice you don't approve of. And I've come to realize that it wasn't love at all. It was ownership. You didn't love me. You loved the idea of controlling me, of using me as a chess piece in your social games. The moment I became an individual instead of an asset, I had no value to you. My father opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't done. So, no, I won't help you. Not because I'm cruel, but because I finally understand that I don't owe you anything. You made your choices, and you lived with them for 5 years while I built a life from nothing. Now you get to live with them a little longer. I pulled out a business card from my pocket, one I had prepared after my mother's phone call, anticipating this moment. It was for a charitable organization that helped people with medical expenses. They might be able to help you, I said, handing the card to my mother. That's all I can offer. I turned to walk back to my office, then paused and looked back at them one more time. You taught me something valuable, though, I said. You taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them. It's about who sees you at your worst and chooses to stay. It's about building something real instead of performing something perfect. So, thank you for that lesson. It was the only gift you ever gave me that mattered. Then I walked away, leaving them standing in my lobby. I didn't look back. I heard through the social grapevine a few months later that my father had died. His heart simply gave out. And without the money for proper medical care, there wasn't much that could be done. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I felt nothing at the news, not satisfaction, not sadness, just a strange emptiness where a relationship should have been but never really was. Ethan went to prison for 12 years. I saw his mugshot on the news, looking nothing like the smug, superior brother I remembered. He looked scared and small, which might have bothered me if I had any emotional energy left to spare on him. My mother, I learned, moved to a small apartment across town, living on Social Security and whatever remained after the bankruptcy proceedings. I heard from an old family friend at a charity event that Eleanor spent most of her time telling anyone who would listen about her successful daughter. The designer and businesswoman, conveniently leaving out the part where she had disowned me and left me to die. She also apparently complained bitterly that her ungrateful daughter refused to help her in her time of need, completely rewriting history to make herself the victim. I could have corrected the record. I could have told everyone the truth about what they had done to me. But I didn't. Their lies and self-delusions weren't my problem anymore. I had better things to do with my time. Liam's Precision Auto continued to grow. Within a few years, we expanded to multiple locations, specializing in high-end restoration work that attracted clients from across the country. Liam's reputation for craftsmanship and integrity spread, and some of the same social circles that had once looked down on him were now paying premium prices for his work. The garage became so successful that we were featured in automotive magazines, and Liam was invited to speak at industry conferences. The pinnacle came when Liam decided to host a major classic car exhibition at our flagship location. The centerpiece of the show was a rare 1967 Shelby GT 500, a car my father had always dreamed of owning but never could quite afford. Liam had found it as a rusted shell in a barn in upstate New York, and over 2 years, he had meticulously restored it to perfect condition. Every part was period correct, every detail exact. It was a masterpiece. The night of the exhibition, dozens of collectors, enthusiasts, and media representatives attended. Liam gave a speech, standing next to the Shelby, talking about the art of restoration, about seeing value where others saw only ruin, about the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again. Then he thanked me. None of this would exist without my wife, he said, his voice carrying across the crowded showroom. Ava taught me that success isn't measured by where you start. It's measured by what you build when everyone tells you it's impossible. She stood by me when we had nothing, when the world told her she was making a mistake, when even her own family abandoned her. She's the strongest person I know, and everything I've accomplished is because she believed in me when no one else did. This isn't just my business. It's ours. It's proof that family isn't who shares your last name. Family is who shares your dreams and refuses to let you give up on them. The crowd applauded, but I barely heard it. I was looking at Liam, at the life we had built together, at the people in this room who respected us not because of our name or our connections, but because of our work and our character. This moment, this success, it wasn't about my parents at all. It was about us, about what was possible when you built something on love instead of obligation, on mutual respect instead of control. That night, after everyone had gone home, Liam, Maya, and I sat in the showroom with the restored Shelby. Maya, now 10 years old, asked me if I was sad that my parents weren't there to see this. It was a thoughtful question from a kid who was growing up knowing she had only one set of grandparents, Liam's wonderful, warm, working-class parents who had welcomed me without hesitation and loved Maya fiercely. I thought about her question carefully before answering. "No, baby," I told her. "I'm not sad." Because if they were the kind of people who could appreciate this, they would have been the kind of people who never turned me away in the first place. And if they hadn't turned me away, I might never have learned how strong I really am. I might never have learned what real love looks like. I might never have built this life. She seemed satisfied with that answer, resting her head on my shoulder as we looked at the gleaming car. Today, almost 8 years after that terrible night on the marble steps, I stand in the garden of our beautiful home. It's not a mansion like the one I grew up in. It's better. It's filled with laughter and warmth and love that isn't conditional on performance or obedience. Maya is thriving, a confident, kind, creative kid who knows she's loved not because of what she achieves but because of who she is. Phoenix Design has expanded beyond my wildest dreams. We've worked with major brands, won industry awards, and more importantly, we've helped hundreds of small businesses and entrepreneurs build their dreams from the ground up. I've employed dozens of people who needed a second chance, who needed someone to believe in them, the way Liam believed in me. Sometimes I think about my parents. I wonder if my mother is still alive, still rewriting history to make herself the victim, still unable to comprehend why her daughter won't rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. I wonder if my father, in his final moments, felt any regret for the daughter he threw away. I wonder if Ethan, sitting in his prison cell, ever reflects on the greed and arrogance that destroyed his family. But these thoughts don't consume me anymore. They're like background noise, easily ignored, because I've learned the most important lesson of all. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's creation. It's building something so beautiful, so genuine, so full of love, that the opinions of people who hurt you become irrelevant. It's reaching a point where you don't need their approval, their apology, or their recognition. It's being so completely healed that you can look back at the people who broke you and feel nothing but distant pity. My parents spent their lives chasing status and wealth, only to lose it all and die alone. I spent my life building love and community, and I have more riches than they ever dreamed of, even if those riches can't be measured in dollars. They told me not to waste good insurance on a failed investment. But they wasted something far more precious. They wasted the love of a daughter who would have given them everything if they had just chosen to see her worth. They gambled on pride and cruelty and lost the only bet that ever really mattered. I don't forgive them. Forgiveness implies that what they did was forgivable, and I'm not sure it was. But I also don't hate them. Hate requires caring, and I simply don't anymore. They're strangers who share my DNA. Nothing more, nothing less. In the world I've built with my own 2 hands, surrounded by people who chose to love me and who I chose to love back, their absence doesn't leave a hole. It leaves space for better things, for healthier relationships, for genuine joy that doesn't come with strings attached. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not helping them when they needed me. They frame it as a moral question, as if refusing to rescue people who left you to die makes you the villain of the story. But here's what I've learned. Compassion doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when that person was the one who handed you the matches and told you that you deserved to burn. I teach Maya this lesson in gentler ways. I teach her that she doesn't owe anyone access to her life, her energy, or her resources just because they're related by blood. I teach her that boundaries aren't walls meant to keep love out. They're gates meant to keep harm out and love in. I teach her that she can be kind without being a doormat, generous without being a martyr, and strong without being cruel. She's growing up watching her mother run a successful business while also being present for school plays and soccer games. She's watching her father build engines with the same hands that braid her hair. She's learning that success and love aren't mutually exclusive, that you don't have to choose between ambition and family, that real strength looks like vulnerability and asking for help when you need it. Last month, we celebrated the 10-year anniversary of Liam's Precision Auto. We threw a huge party at the main garage, inviting everyone who had been part of our journey. Employees, clients, friends, Liam's parents, the people who had supported us when we were struggling. Mr. Miller gave a toast about taking chances on people who are hungry for opportunity, and I realized that I had become that person for others. Phoenix Design had helped launch over 200 small businesses. We had employed single mothers, reformed addicts, people with criminal records who couldn't get hired anywhere else, immigrants trying to build new lives. We had taken Mr. Sound Miller's philosophy and multiplied it. At the party, I looked around at all these people, this chosen family we had built, and I felt something I had never felt in my childhood home. I felt peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from walking on eggshells and meeting impossible expectations, but the solid peace that comes from being genuinely known and genuinely loved anyway. A reporter from a local business magazine interviewed me for a feature about women entrepreneurs. She asked me what advice I would give to young women starting their own businesses. I thought about it for a moment, and then I told her something I had never said publicly before. I told her that sometimes the people who are supposed to support you will be the ones who try to tear you down. I told her that sometimes your biggest obstacle won't be lack of resources or experience, but the voices in your head telling you that you're not enough, voices that often sound suspiciously like people who were supposed to love you. And I told her that the moment you stop seeking validation from people who are incapable of giving it is the moment you become truly free. The article came out a few weeks later with the headline, Phoenix Rising: How Ava O'Connor Built an Empire from the Ashes of Family Rejection. It went viral in business circles. I got hundreds of messages from people telling me their own stories of family betrayal, of choosing themselves over toxic relationships, of building new lives from nothing. Some of them were angry on my behalf, wanting to know my family's names so they could shame them publicly, but I never gave those details. This story wasn't about punishing them. It was about liberating myself. I heard through the grapevine that my mother saw the article. Apparently, she was furious, claiming I had twisted the truth and made them look like monsters when they had only wanted what was best for me. I heard she tried to contact several news outlets with her version of events, but no one was particularly interested in the justifications of a woman who had left her pregnant daughter to die on her doorstep. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. Part of me, a small, petty part, felt satisfied by that, but mostly I just felt tired. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't take responsibility. She couldn't admit that she had made a choice, and that choice had consequences. She was still the victim in her own mind, still the wronged party, still waiting for me to come crawling back and apologize for the crime of living my own life. She would be waiting forever. I've built something here that she will never understand. I've built a life where my value isn't determined by my usefulness to others, where my worth isn't contingent on obedience, where love isn't something I have to earn through sacrifice and suffering. I've built a family where mistakes are met with grace instead of rejection, where success is celebrated instead of used as ammunition, where we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down to feel superior. And you know what the strangest part is? I'm grateful. Not for what they did to me. I'll never be grateful for that cruelty. But I'm grateful for what it taught me. I'm grateful that I learned early that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that wealth doesn't guarantee character, that appearances often hide rot underneath. I'm grateful that I was forced to build my own strength instead of relying on inherited privilege. I'm grateful that I learned the difference between real love and conditional approval. My daughter will never know what it's like to feel less than, to beg for scraps of affection, to twist herself into shapes to fit someone else's expectations. She will never lie awake wondering if she's good enough, because she will always know that she is more than enough exactly as she is. And that, more than any business success or financial security, is my greatest accomplishment. 3 months ago, I was invited to speak at my alma mater's graduation. Standing at that podium, looking out at all those young faces full of hope and uncertainty, I thought about who I was at their age. I thought about how desperately I had wanted my parents' approval, how much of myself I had diminished to try to earn love that should have been freely given. I told those graduates something I wished someone had told me. I told them that some people will love you for who you are, and some people will only love you for who they want you to be. I told them that choosing yourself over someone else's vision of you isn't selfish, it's survival. I told them that the relationships worth keeping are the ones that don't require you to shrink, to hide, to apologize for taking up space. And I told them that if they ever find themselves on someone's doorstep, pregnant and sick and begging for help, and that person tells them they're not worth saving, believe them. Believe that they're showing you exactly who they are, and then walk away, build something beautiful with people who see your worth, and never look back. The standing ovation I received wasn't for my business success. It was for surviving. It was for choosing life when death seemed easier. It was for building love when hate would have been justified. It was for showing them that you can be both strong and gentle, both successful and humble, both hurt and healed. After the speech, a young woman approached me, tears streaming down her face. She told me her parents had disowned her for being gay, that she was working 3 jobs to put herself through school, that she was exhausted and scared and didn't know if she could keep going. She asked me how I found the strength to keep fighting when the people who were supposed to love me most had given up on me. I looked at this brave young woman, barely 22 years old, carrying the weight of rejection that no one should have to carry, and I told her the truth. The strength wasn't something I found, I said. It was something I built, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. Every time I woke up and chose to keep going, I was building it. Every time I asked for help instead of suffering in silence, I was building it. Every time I set a boundary or walked away from toxicity or chose my own well-being over someone else's comfort, I was building it. Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you create out of necessity, out of desperation, out of the refusal to let cruelty have the final word. I gave her my card and told her to contact Phoenix Design when she graduated. We would have a place for her if she wanted it. Her tears of despair turned to tears of hope, and in that moment, I understood something profound. This was why it all happened. Not some cosmic plan or divine purpose, because I don't believe suffering is ever deserved or necessary. But if I had to endure it anyway, at least I could use it to light the way for others walking the same dark path. That's what I've tried to do with Phoenix Design, with my life, with my story. I've tried to be the person I needed when I was at my lowest. I've tried to build the safe haven I was denied. I've tried to prove that rejection by small-minded people doesn't determine your worth, that starting from nothing doesn't mean ending with nothing, that love is something you can choose to create even if you never received it the way you deserved. Now, as I stand in my garden watching Maya play with her friends, watching Liam work on restoring yet another classic car in our garage, feeling the sun warm on my face, and knowing that every good thing in my life is something I built with my own determination and the help of people who chose to believe in me, I can finally say something I never thought I would be able to say. I'm happy. Not despite what happened, but as a person who survived what happened and refused to let it define me. I'm happy in a way that people who have never had to fight for their worth might never fully understand. It's the happiness of someone who has seen the darkness and chose the light anyway. It's the happiness of someone who was told she was worthless and proved that assessment catastrophically wrong. It's the happiness of someone who has nothing to prove anymore because she already proved everything that mattered. My parents thought they were punishing me when they cut me off. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about consequences and poor choices, but the lesson I learned was different than the one they intended. I learned that their approval was never worth having in the first place. I learned that some cages are lined with silk, but they're still cages. I learned that freedom and struggle are infinitely preferable to comfort and captivity. They died rich in money but poor in love. I'll die rich in love, even if I never have a fraction of their wealth. And when I'm old and gray, looking back on my life, I'll know that every scar I carry was worth it because each one marks a moment when I chose myself, when I chose love, when I chose life over the slow death of living for someone else's approval. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between the life you wanted and the approval of people who claim to love you? Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were constantly giving but never receiving, constantly proving but never enough? Have you ever had to walk away from family, from friends, from anyone who made loving them feel like work instead of joy? If you have, I want you to know something. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not ungrateful or selfish or any of the other words they might have thrown at you to make you doubt yourself. You're just someone who decided that you deserved better than crumbs disguised as a feast, than criticism disguised as concern, than control disguised as love. And if you're still in that situation, still wondering if you're strong enough to walk away, still telling yourself that maybe if you just try harder or change more or become what they want you to be, then finally you'll be worthy of their love, let me tell you something else. You already are worthy. You've always been worthy. Their inability to see it is their failure, not yours. And staying in that situation won't change them. It will only slowly kill the parts of you that make you who you are. Walking away is terrifying. Building from nothing is exhausting. Standing firm in your boundaries when everyone tells you that you're wrong will make you question everything about yourself. But I promise you, I swear to you on everything I've built and everything I've survived, that the life waiting for you on the other side of that fear is more beautiful than anything you can imagine from where you're standing now. It won't be easy. There will be days when you question your decision, when the loneliness feels unbearable, when you wonder if you made a terrible mistake. There will be moments when you see them posting happy photos on social media and wonder if you're the problem, if you're being too sensitive, if you should just apologize and go back. Don't. Those moments pass. The strength you're building doesn't. And one day, maybe years from now, you'll be standing in your own garden, metaphorical or literal, surrounded by people who chose you and who you chose back, and you'll realize that you haven't thought about them in weeks. You'll realize that their opinion no longer has power over you. You'll realize that you built something real and lasting from the rubble they left you with, and that you did it not to prove anything to them, but to save yourself. That's when you'll know you've won. Not because they lost, but because you found something they never had. authentic love, genuine peace, and the unshakable knowledge that you are enough exactly as you are. So if my story resonates with you, if you've lived your own version of being thrown away by people who should have held on tighter, drop a comment and tell me about it. Let's build a community of people who chose themselves, who walked away from toxicity, who built beautiful lives from broken pieces. Hit that like button if you believe that family is about choice, not biology. And subscribe because I'm going to keep telling stories about survival, about strength, about what happens when you refuse to let cruelty win. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have helped them when they came begging, or would you have turned them away? Is there ever a point where refusing to help family is justified, or do we always owe them something just because we share blood? I want to hear your thoughts, your stories, your perspectives, because this conversation is bigger than just me. It's about all of us trying to figure out where loyalty ends and self-preservation begins. Remember, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so full of love and purpose and joy that the people who rejected you become irrelevant. It's healing so completely that you can look back without anger, forward without fear, and stay present in the beautiful life you created. You are worthy of love that doesn't come with conditions. You are worthy of family that shows up. You are worthy of being seen, valued, and cherished for exactly who you are. And if the people around you can't see that, find new people, build a new family, create a new life. It's never too late, and you're never too broken. Trust me on that. I'm living proof.